Hi, everybody. Welcome again to our Webisode. Yay, IronEdge Group. Today we've got our friends from THREATLOCKER. We've got Colin joining us. THREATLOCKER is a partner with the IronEdge Group. We'll talk a little bit about his role in the Webisode and what THREATLOCKER helps us with. We are not here to sell you THREATLOCKER. We are not here to sell you security services from IronEdge Group, but we are going to talk about advanced threat defense. We're going to talk a little bit about a lot about zero trust and what that means on networks and for applications. So just settle in. We're going to go through that. We've got some demos that we're going to do. So don't expect a sales pitch, but we are going to talk a little bit about how the THREATLOCKER product works and what advantages organizations can see by implementing a zero trust solution. Without further ado, my name is Andrew Moore. I'm the COO of the IronEdge Group. I have been in technology in some way or the other for the last 20 something years. Joining me today is Rob. Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm the director of security over at IronEdge, and I've been in the IT field for over 20 years. And yeah, I guess.
And you're awesome, and you helped implement all of our security policies and processes, and you've been working directly with THREATLOCKER to make sure that all of our stuff's being deployed, and you're helping to create new packages in an ever-changing market. So don't sell yourself short, sir. And then we've got Colin Ellis joining us from THREATLOCKER. Colin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization?
Thanks, guys. My name is Colin Ellis. I'm a senior solutions engineer at THREATLOCKER. I work hand to hand with Rob and team here to make sure implementation of the software goes off really smooth. My role, going a bit further into the THREATLOCKER side of things, I help training, onboarding absolutely everyone across the board. So new technicians, new members of the staff, I'm pretty much the go-to point of contact there. I've been in the tech space for about 10 years. I previously worked at the lovely ConnectWise on all the automation side of the house there. So very familiar with how your environments work and how we can really help facilitate a deeper level of security on that end. But yeah, it's been a pleasure working with the team so far.
Excellent. So about our webisode, I will talk just briefly about some of the things that we're going to get into today. We're going to do a demo on THREATLOCKER. Colin's going to show us some of the features and functionalities. One of the things that I think is really important for everyone to consider when we're going through this today is that this isn't just an explanation of how some of these products work or how some of these security systems should be implemented within a business. This is also good if you are an MSP and you're out there looking to implement solutions like this for your clients, some of the best practices and systems that are in place. So for our friendly competitors out there, feel free to reach out to the THREATLOCKER team if you could use some help with getting this moving in the right direction for your organization and for your clients. So let's jump right into what is going on. Why is security hard, right? What's happening in the space out there where businesses and technologists are concerned about technology and what makes this current situation that we're in with security different than it was in the past. Rob, kind of give us some ideas about what you're seeing today versus what we saw maybe 5 years ago when it comes to technology and what's hard and why people are having to go above and beyond to secure their environments when they didn't have to before.
Yeah, so previously, all we really ever had to worry about was viruses and blocking bad websites, right? Because everything has changed. Over the last several years, ransomware, as everybody knows, has been front and center, and it's evolving daily. I see the reports pretty much every day of new types of ransomware and new companies getting hit with ransomware and new industry sectors being targeted. So that is front and center. Bad actors want to make money. This is how they're doing it. And it's never used to be that way. So with that, you've got, as a business, you've got different things you have to do, whether it's cyber insurance, having the right tools in place to prevent it. And even with the cyber insurance, they're getting hard. Those questionnaires are getting long, they're getting difficult, they're requiring you to have a number of different features and functionality to help protect yourself. whether it's EDR, zero trust, like we're going to get into a little bit more, SIM, whatever the case may be. It's finding that balance in being productive, being able to make money as a business, and being able to protect yourselves. So it's a continually evolving situation. So
And
that's what's making it really hard.
yeah, and I think that just from a landscape standpoint, just the changes that have happened in the last couple of years since the pandemic, we're also seeing a lot of managed services organizations being targeted and being taken advantage of as kind of a central point of contact. Colin, what do you see that MSPs and other organizations that are deploying ThreatLocker, what do you see from them that is spurring these difficult security decisions that they're now having to make in these new investments?
Right. And there's so many moving parts there. And one thing you mentioned, Rob, is the attackers themselves. What we tend to not give them credit for is how organized they've become over the past few years. So we're not just talking about nation state attacks where other governments are getting involved, but you can figuratively have them operate as their own businesses. So just to give you an example, Clop ransomware, an attacking group I love to speak about because of how organized they are. The majority of the team was arrested out in Ukraine a couple months ago. But the fact that the feds and officials can still capture those individuals and they can still hit you with ransomware 2 days later just shows how expansive their team actually is. So they're organized. They're essentially an MSP, but on the black hat side of the house. They are building up the same resources. They have access to the same tools, and they target your users and clients the same way. So what you mentioned there, Andrew, over the past 2 years now, since really the height of COVID, this remote workforce conversation, myself, my team, we're all spread out throughout the United States, and it's the same for most companies, and they're picking up on that. If you don't have a perimeter, that perimeter is completely gone. The moment COVID came into the conversation, that perimeter went straight out the window. So the layers that you have in place aren't being as effective as they used to be. And with all the moving parts, especially because of how organized those attackers are, it makes it pretty simple for them to target just about anyone moving forward.
And one of the things that we've noticed too, in working with your team and then kind of writ large what's happening in the cybersecurity space is there are a lot of organizations that these hacking groups are exploiting, purchasing black market 0 days. And what they're doing is they're actually integrating payloads and execution scripts nested in other valid applications and systems, right? So it becomes more difficult, whereas before, you kind of knew that if you kept things patched in a certain way, and if you ran antivirus and it was, running the latest, DAT file or whatever that used to be, right? Like, so those things would allow you some level of protection, but now you're getting things that are like 3 and 4 levels deep where they're nesting application security holes inside of application security holes inside of application security holes so that they can get to the point where they can run these scripts to either encrypt your environment or to open backdoors so they can get inside. Are you guys, is that something that you guys see as being something that's being expanded on out there in cybersecurity right now or not?
Definitely. And this is where we come back to defining what we think zero trust actually means. So using Microsoft as an example, because they're pretty direct. Every month, Microsoft has Patch Tuesday. And if we're being realistic about what that really means, some human in the equation, whether it's a developer the person who handles QA in that stack, they made an error. They released code that was a little bit too open, a little bit too vulnerable, and people can poke holes. So like you mentioned, we used to be safe by just waiting for a patch, but that patch might never come out until that threat actor decides to weaponize it. So we go through this motion where we're hoping that the vendor software is as secure as possible, but we will never know. You have no control over that. So that's what we're looking to kind of bring a shift in the security conversation. If we know that something like PowerShell, as an example, it tends to be the gateway application. After someone can get access, they're moving laterally, that east and west traffic pops up, but you should have control of that level of automation. We shouldn't wait until PowerShell does something nefarious that now our eyes are on it. We understand how PowerShell should be used. So that's where we like to start the conversation. If we know what's supposed to transpire, we can eliminate a lot of that risk inherently just by allowing software to run. Because at the end of the day, ransomware is still software. And if it's not on the list, it's probably shouldn't be something that's able to execute whatsoever. And that's how we like to steer that conversation. So if we understand what should really be out there, the detection tools, like we're looking at the triangle here, they play a great role, but what we're hoping now is that they pick up something the moment it happens. And as far as I can tell, and for the people in the room here, you can let me know if I'm incorrect or not, but we understand exactly where only hoping detection wins kind of leads to. You think about the pipeline attack, SolarWinds Orion, really any high profile attack. A lot of those detection tools were present, but the issue now becomes we're waiting until something bad happens before being proactive in that sense. And that's where the difficulty really comes in.
No, I agree. And Rob, when it comes to a multi-layered approach, you've been working with the product now and with other advanced level antivirus solutions, EDR solutions. Do you feel like that just having an EDR or a threat hunting system on an environment is sufficient? Like if it's just 1 or 2 layers deep, or do you feel like having an additional system that proactively shuts down the applications before they run or whatever, do you feel like that's actually preventing issues before they come up, or is it simply just adding a layer of complexity to an environment?
It's really both. It does help having that additional layer, because having just an EDR, where you've got your Nextgen AV and a team behind you looking at what's going in and out of that one device at a time, that's a single layer. Anything could be developed to slip through that. But really having the multiple layers between EDR, SIM, zero trust, like ThreatLocker does, it allows us to be able to really know that we're fairly protected. Now, it's never an end all be all, nothing's 100% guaranteed, things can still slip through, but it gives you different layers and different basically checkpoints that something's going through to get caught. From a complexity perspective, yes, as we add tools, the complexity becomes more. Because with an EDR, you've got to understand how it's detecting things. Is it going to pick up on your local backup tool? If it does, then you got to whitelist it and do all this other stuff. So we're just adding to that complexity. But what we get out of that complexity is peace of mind, and also the ability to, as I was mentioning earlier, you've got to be able to answer audit questions, cybersecurity questionnaires. You're able to confidently answer those, so that way you're protected, or you're passing an audit, or God forbid something does happen, your insurance company will help pay for it. So
Right.
it's the trade-offs.
So when it comes to this level of putting together the zero trust systems, why is this different than what we saw in the market 5 years ago at the network layer? So there has been zero trust in the past at the enterprise level. What makes using ThreatLocker different than the other products that are out on the market currently for
Zero
that?
trust, right? And it's always been the standard. We know if we approach everything the same way we configure our firewalls, we don't allow all traffic, we lock that down, and we only allow the things that make sense. So the biggest shift now is the workload. Traditionally, if you're implementing zero trust, just controlling applications, you'll deal with some older tools that would even block things like Windows updates. Someone on staff would have to look at maybe 1909 upgrading to 22H2 or Windows 11, and that could be anywhere from 80,000 to honestly 120 plus individual files that someone would have to manually whitelist. And that's where we're looking to make a difference. If we can maintain Windows updates and dependencies dependencies and remove that from your type of management, we allow zero trust to be pretty palatable. But now the automation is really the key. Instead of anyone on staff having to track things as simple as Google Chrome updating, that's where we offer the coverage to make sure that the typical things, the day-to-day apps, your business can still function without a lot of heavy touches. The goal now is to make sure that thinking about the triangle, no matter what layers we put in place, at the end of the day, humans, us, everyone on staff, that is where the risk will always be. The humans on our tech team, the humans that we are managing, we're protecting in a day-to-day, one click can always make the difference. And that's what we're looking to build a bit more assurance around. It doesn't matter if someone clicks something that's bad, intentionally or unintentionally. That zero trust mentality allows us to make sure that that isn't creating a script that is bringing down the entire network. We have control over scripts in that essence. So that's the goal. If we can give you control over what's supposed to go on, like Rob mentioned, we are looking to make sure you guys can sleep better because you know the control is there. We're not just hoping something bad gets picked up. And that is really the shift in the perspective.
That's an interesting shift from where there was the idea that things were just going to figure the systems are going to figure things out on their own, to putting the responsibility of being able to maintain a customized way of interacting with this sort of application, this security, right? Like, so these policies that you can use are agent based. They're based on the needs of your organization. You can whitelist certain things without necessarily them being, even if there is some level of concern that they may be even the least bit malicious, organizations get to make their own decisions around that, right? Like, so it's not just like, we're going to block this, right? You've got these policies that are being built and these databases of information that are being created in order to make the administration of this particular product easier, and also the ability to manage it across a wide geographic platform rather than having everybody behind a firewall and in a network. And so I think for those reasons, as organizations work hybrid, that it really adds to the toolkit for being able to protect their end users when they're out and about and they might do something goofy.
Right. And I second that, because especially when you think about traveling to a different country, a different state, you connecting to the hotel Wi-Fi, that airport Wi-Fi, things so simple just open up the layer of risk there. We've done it quite a few times at Zero Trust, a lot of the conferences. It makes it pretty simple to build a pineapple and force your machine to connect in. And that's all it takes to start capturing some information. So the big fundamental about how we move forward is so simple. If we can give you guys visibility, instead of you diving into maybe 6 or 7 different tools to kind of piece together what's going on, we get to make that security conversation really simple. Something executes, there's data being looked at, being touched, one place to paint that full picture, and it gives you that ability to build policies a bit more concise. So typically on my calls, we pick on group policy. We've all lived that life. You deploy a GPO and you're kind of crossing your fingers at this point, hoping things make sense. And that's what we're looking to get rid of. If we can show you everything that's happening, it makes it pretty simple to piece everything together.
And one thing,
go ahead, Rob.
One thing I like with the platform is when we have to install a new application, whether for ourselves or for a client, I can go into the unified audit and pick out exactly what's being blocked or what's needed and add it to the policy. And then that way, if somebody tries to mimic that in any kind of way as a download, if it doesn't meet the right path, hash, cert, it doesn't run. So it makes things, it makes things a little difficult sometimes, but at the end of the day, like Colin mentioned, you can see everything that's happening as that application's trying to install, and so you're able to build the policies around it.
Right.
The other day I was out and about. I forget where I was, and I was like in some place that I didn't have internet, and I was checking my Wi-Fi. I was like, okay, maybe there's like a secure internet I can get on, and there was this SSID. It said free internet, and I was like, good Lord. Right. And it was like totally open. There was no like lock on it or anything like that. I was like, yeah, that's a pineapple.
For
Somebody out
sure.
there like driving around with a windowless van that says free internet on the side. It was terrible. Let's talk a little bit about, Colin, I'm going to turn this over to you so you can go through some demos and kind of talk about the product a little bit so people can get a better understanding of what it does. So talk to us a little bit about, and we've already gone a little bit into ThreatLocker, but kind of talk to us a little bit about ThreatLocker and kind of show us some of the guts of the system and kind of go through a few of the items that are going to help the people that are participating understand a little bit more about what y'all do and how it works.
Definitely. And right before I dive in, the one thing I want to stress is regardless of the role in question, whether you are on the front lines as a level 1 tech, you're running up the chain, level 2, 3, you're sysadmin, at the end of the day, our roles are designed to support those clients, their needs, and the software that they're using. So one of the things that I feel we give you such a good win for, again, is this visibility. And I'll show you a few examples, but at the end of the day, every technician has to have some form of comfort with the software that's running. You guys aren't developers. You didn't make this software. We can't expect you to know every single thing about it. So outside of just the controls, I want to stress the visibility here is what makes such a difference as to how we move forward and what we do. So as a zero trust tool, we are looking to lock down software, what's running on the network. But before we do any of that, the first win you're going to get is the agent's ability to learn. A lot of the typical man hours that we would be put in towards a zero trust or maintaining a whitelist, we're looking to really automate that and make things pretty simple. So the moment the agents are deployed, they're in a completely passive state, and the goal is to let it learn about the network and really identify what makes the business tick. We're not looking to lock down and have things blocked and create issues, because ideally, as a partner, if you guys are getting tickets, that means I'm getting tickets, and no one needs any more tickets. So if something is popping up, the goal is to make sure it's truly something net new. And I want to show you guys exactly how we do this. So again, the moment the agent is deployed, it starts identifying everything installed, everything with the ability to execute, even script files. So whether it's a workstation, a server, no matter the grouping, the end goal is for the agent to identify everything there, and it will automatically give you a policy to control everything about what that app, that process, that script is capable of doing. So visibility and control becomes the two big fundamentals there. So instead of you guys having to hunt down those line of business tools, the custom software that the clients might be using, we let the agent get that hard work done. It will identify everything out there with the ability to run, and you get the ability to do something like this. If you guys have compliance requirements that specify one browser, a lot of times it becomes really hard to block anything tied to the OS because it's the OS itself. But unless it needs to run, it will never be able to execute. So one of the things we love to do and we love to show off is this, because the concept of what we're presenting is control. Let's say you're deploying to a site that you know is infected. What are you using to remediate and take back control of the network? And this is a byproduct of what we do, but you'll notice if something is running, we give you the ability to terminate that process or invoke the policy controls you see fit. So in so many examples, you could think back to last year when Exchange was compromised or when SolarWinds Orion was targeted. Command and control was taken by threat actors, and we get to give that right back to you. If something is misusing maybe a tool like PowerShell, it's beaconing, listening to commands, that's no longer an issue for us because of the type of control that you'll have moving forward. So it's very simple. We learn about everything that's currently going on, and at the end of it, you have policy control across any machine, anywhere they are. So this is just the first half. I mentioned visibility becomes really important to what we do. So this is where we get to show off the unified auditing. I'm really in love with the naming convention here because this is the thing that we're looking to make a difference. And if I hit search, just as an example, I'll save this browser agent for a second here. You'll notice the type of auditing you get. So instead of you guys jumping into your firewall tool, instead of you jumping into event logs from a machine, just to tell a client how someone used something like Google Chrome, you'll notice the way I can search. If Chrome executes in any capacity, you can search by that. You're not looking to hunt down information. Our goal is to kind of bring this directly to your fingertips. So if the user is communicating over the network, they're going to different websites. You get to fulfill that need, that question. But more importantly now, if Chrome is touching other software, you have the ability to say you can track everything that's going on down to the process. How does this app interact with other tools? What is it doing while it's running? So if we can give you that visibility, it makes it pretty simple for you to put policies in place. So I mentioned we deploy in a learning state, and this is what the agent uses to build out all of those policies. And that's the goal. You just have control of things moving forward. So after we let the agents learn, at a bare minimum, we say 7 to 10 days before you do anything else, you get this ability to actually simulate the lockdown. So I pick on group policy all the time. I was mentioning to you guys earlier, if you deploy a GPO right this second, not only do you have to wait until that GPO is fielded, you're hoping the restrictions, the policies you're putting in place make sense. But we give you the ability to see all of that ahead of time. So if I'm looking to restrict my machine, my server in any way, you really get to simulate that lockdown and make sure the controls we're putting in place actually make sense. But I wanted to show you guys what it looks like. If we're talking about the humans in the equation, how often do you see attacks where someone will click a link in an email or just navigate to an incorrect URL and now software is running? So our goal is to say something very simple. You think about just scope of attacks dealing with remote access tools, things like TeamViewer, AnyDesk, and you really understand why they're allowed to run. And this is where I want to stress, I'm not picking on TeamViewer because it's a bad tool. It's quite the opposite. It's such a reputable tool, a reputable piece of software. Any security tool you're leveraging will most likely allow something like TeamViewer to run because it's not bad. But what is software at the end of the day? It's just code. The intention of that is where things make a big difference. And that's where we feel threat hunting, threat detecting, AV tools, they missed the mark here a little bit. And it's really simple. You can't judge intent. So if you're browsing through your email, you actually accidentally click a link, all of a sudden TeamViewer is running without you knowing, that's where the holes come in. And I pick on TeamViewer personally because of this. It is a tool that actually doesn't require any administrative rights to install. It bypasses UAC. So even if you have your group policy active, it can go straight past it, and so can most pieces of software. So at the end of the day, one of the first questions that is always proposed to us is how do we actually stop ransomware from running? And it comes back to this. It's still software at the end of the day. So if it's never supposed to execute, we will never allow it to run. If someone is remoting into your network, we want to make sure you can have full control of that. So outside of just stopping the tool from running, you'll notice a few things. Our goal here is to make it very transactional. There's no judging whether or not TeamViewer is bad. We'll let you know right away. We have this thing called built-ins, and this is where we again take that lift from the zero trust conversation. If it matches a ThreatLocker built-in, that means our team validated it with TeamViewer on your behalf, down to the hash, down to the certificate, absolutely everything about it. So you get that validation, but more importantly, you get control. If someone is remoting in, instead of you going back and forth with GPO, you say to that vendor, that asset who's making that connection, you can only touch one machine. There's no reason for you to patch my servers in the middle of the day. So that's the goal. We're looking to make sure from a control perspective, you get to do things as simple as this. Yeah, TeamViewer can run, but it can only run for a day or an hour. And I get this ability to make things pretty transactional, pretty smooth. And that's really the goal. If I want to make sure that tool can be allowed, we're not hoping the technicians now remember to go back and uninstall it. That's where the human error comes in. And that's what we're looking to give you a bit more control of. So if something like TeamViewer can run against my machine, makes it pretty simple. You get to audit that. And instead of you forcing GPOs to update, waiting patiently, you get that in about 60 seconds. And it will actually pop up here on the bottom right-hand corner once the policy updates have been fielded, and you're good to run the software. But this is the goal. We're looking to take the guesswork out of it. If something needs to run, make that pretty simple. You get to validate it and then allow things as you see fit.
Well, and Colin, one of the things that I think is really important to remember about the tool is it's not at a very high level. I think it's easy for a lot of the people that are going to be watching our showcase here today understand that there's an application. We don't want the application to run, so we're going to block the application, or we're going to set parameters around when the application can run. But one of the most interesting things that I think about the product that I like a lot and that Rob was very keen on when we brought y'all on board was the ability to prevent the application from doing things using other applications, or that if you had a known good application, that there was a potential that you could, at some point, if it became compromised, you could lock it down.
Could lock it down.
That's cool.
Right. So yeah, that layer now is what allows us to take security just one step further, is what I like to say. And this is where we introduce ring fencing. Because like you mentioned, Andrew, any piece of software can be weaponized at some point in time. So our goal now is to say it doesn't matter when that vulnerability takes place, we understand exactly how it should behave. So I'll give you a few examples, and we'll pick on PowerShell today. Command prompt, those administrative tools. So these aren't third-party tools, they're tied to the Windows core. So if there's a vulnerability tied to Exchange or something like Office, we understand how these tools should behave, but I'll build on this example for you. So first off, I want to stress, we give you control. So things like scripts, if there's a vulnerability and that allows an attacker to just push down malicious scripts and have them run, you'll notice right away, batch files, VBS scripts, PowerShell scripts, because of the control, you have policy, decisions here. We know ducky.bat should never be able to execute, so we'll never allow it to. But what if that attacker is already inside? Like you mentioned, Andrew, what if there's already a vulnerability that gives them the access they need? Something as simple as this. If I choose to edit this script instead, you'll notice the intent. We're going to use the tools on the system. So it'll have PowerShell open, execute, and it will give a lot of access. So instead of allowing something like that, you'll notice this. If I run the same line of code in command prompt, at this point, the vulnerability is open. I have physical access to the machine or remote access. That doesn't matter. We know exactly how the software should behave. So even if someone can gain full control of PowerShell or full control of command prompt, there are a few things we know from the very beginning. And it becomes pretty simple to ease the security conversation now. We'll never look at an organization and say, stop your automation. You guys definitely didn't grow to the point that you have without it. So we'll say, take control of it. PowerShell should be able to run. Your admin task, your automation makes sense. But why is PowerShell touching backups? Why is it trying to exfiltrate or overwrite that information? And this is where ring fencing comes into the fray. So I want to show you guys what this PowerShell policy actually looks like. And I pick on PowerShell because it's going to be the thing that's used in every kill chain. If someone can attack you, they'll definitely leverage it. But you'll notice how we break down control. PowerShell should be able to run, but now you have this ability to decide exactly how much it can do. So one thing we know is this. Windows has two tools built in that actually allows attackers to encrypt you, and they're both a part of the OS. That's PowerShell and BitLocker. You guys have already encrypted most of your endpoints. So if we allow PowerShell to re-encrypt, this is the easiest way for foul-less malware to encrypt you. There's nothing executing here. We're just pushing commands, weaponizing the system itself. But you'll notice the layers. Even if PowerShell is running, you get to decide whether it's a threat actor or a disgruntled internal employee, exactly how much they can do with those administrative tools. So this is where we love to make the difference. Zero trust, The biggest fundamental I want you guys to leave with here is this. We are removing all implicit trust, whether that's to internal users or external threat actors. A lot of times those attacks start internally, and you start to understand why. Right now, for any one of you looking at the webinar and watching this, the most privileged user on your team is probably the biggest hole. PowerShell runs with the same amount of permissions they have. So if PowerShell can talk to the internet, it can exfiltrate anything. It can pull in any malicious payloads. So instead of hoping PowerShell is being used the right way, we give you full control of it and everything else. So when we start this ring fencing conversation, one thing I love to stress is that these aren't policies you're building yourself. They're templated best practices, so they get applied automatically. You think back 10 years ago when PDF bombs were ravaging the security space. Why does it make any sense that Adobe Acrobat has the ability to run code? It's running on Windows, so it has that capability, but we know from the very beginning, something like that shouldn't be allowed. So control is the name of the game. If you can understand everything that's necessary, building in those controls becomes pretty simple.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about this as we've rolled it to clients, it's, my users have they're given admin access.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what level of access they have, they cannot install software.
Whatsoever.
So that closes one of those gaps.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Colin, I know we're running up against time on your presentation. Was there anything else that you wanted to demo while we've got you for a couple more minutes before we get into some of the other security tools that we recommend our listeners and viewers get into a little bit?
Yep, two more things here. And this is where I always want to bring it back to the humans, us, at the end of the day. As security conscious as we all are, we are prone to mistakes. That's what comes with being a human at the end of the day. We'll learn and we'll continue to develop. But the goal here is to omit hoping we are always doing the right thing. So one vulnerability, one attack I wanted to really talk about today was Felina. This was something that was patched by Microsoft, but we deal with this delta in time when a vulnerability comes up before the patch is released. But I wanted to give you guys this example just to show how much of a difference we can make here. We go back to those documents, Office, your Outlook emails. Office is such a widely used tool. That's exactly why spear phishing campaigns exist and why they'll never go away. So if you conduct security awareness training right now, you know exactly which members of your staff fail this test every day. So this is the goal. Instead of hoping that they are always doing the right thing, we get to enforce the policies that make sense. And something we could all agree on at this point is that absolutely nothing in Office would ever require the ability to execute code. So we never allow it. And this is where we get to make that shift in the perspective. We know what good looks like, so that's all we allow. But the reason why I wanted to show this example, about a month ago, Felina graced the security space. Felina was so detrimental, the users didn't even have the ability to validate links. The moment they opened the email or the document itself, code is executing. So the attackers are now removing the humans from the equation, just getting them to make one click. And those are the things we get to really shine a light on and make a big difference moving forward. Because again, we know Office in all its greatness never needs the ability to talk to PowerShell or execute code. So that's where ring fencing tends to make a big difference. But the last example I had for you guys here is permissions now. Rob, you mentioned most of the admins on your team, they have those permitted rights, but they can't install software. So for the end clients, the end users, a lot of times you'll run up against things like QuickBooks, like Dentrix, just line of business tools where developers were thinking they were kind of doing the right thing, but we understand the conundrum they create. So for your financial staff, any medical facilities that you guys manage, instead of you giving those users keys to the kingdom just to have QuickBooks or one tool to elevate, you'll notice this. Not an admin on my machine here, but the goal is to make your control so granular, you can build out policies for anything. The example I love to show off, two here. Something as simple as this. You have a level 1 tech, and this user needs the ability to change adapter settings. He doesn't need to be a domain admin for that. So one thing we're looking to do is really reduce the number of admins out there, period. That way you can mitigate against quite a bit. The only thing I need access to is this DLL. But the goal is simple. If we know exactly how you use your software, we give you that visibility to begin with. Something like QuickBooks doesn't need to be a nightmare anymore. There's no one remoting in, manually passing credentials, because that act in itself becomes pretty insecure. And that's where we can streamline quite a bit and give you some good operational efficiency without you opening up any holes whatsoever. So that's the goal. If we can give you that type of control, it'll make things pretty simple moving forward.
That's awesome. Because I think that's one things that a lot of organizations, especially technology organizations, struggle with is the ability to have least privilege access to certain things. And the way that applications are built, especially non-enterprise environments, it becomes very difficult to be able to allow people to self-serve and to not have to open a ticket with something as basic as an accountant needing to like run an update on QuickBooks, which is something that they should be able to do without much interaction with an IT staff.
So yeah, that was all I had for the team today, guys. I'd definitely love to be on the next webisode, but thank you again so much for having me.
Colin, thanks for jumping in and guesting on our webisode. We appreciate you and ThreatLocker's time, and we wish you the best for the rest of the week. We're going to keep going, y'all, and we're going to talk a little bit more about advanced threat and kind of some of the other tools that are in our universe to try to help protect our clients. One of the things that we recommend everybody is not just the ability to protect yourself from unwanted application execution using a zero trust model or being able to restrict rights and whatnot, but also like where antivirus has gone and what's going on with endpoint detection. So Rob, why don't you tell us a little bit about what that looks like today and why people should be using it?
Yeah, so Nextgen AV, it's, I'm sure most people understand, does things different than the legacy AVs used to, where they were dependent on downloading, updated detection files and things like that. The Nextgen, leverages machine learning, AI, and kind of understands how things are supposed to work and what things shouldn't. So that's how it's detecting. And you'll see a lot are bundled as or labeled as an endpoint detection response or EDR, which just basically tacks on a visibility on the back end that allows a SOC or some other organization to bring that data in and run it through their AI tools and put eyes on glass so they can let people know if there's something suspicious happening on a machine. In addition to, if there's something severe enough, it could take the endpoint offline and isolate it so whatever's happening on the machine can't spread. So that's really where antivirus has gone to over the last probably 6 or 7 years.
And when you're looking at the endpoint detection and response, there's a lot of like different acronyms out there, right? There's EDR, MDR, XDR. Like, what do the different things mean? And when you talked about a SOC, like for the folks that aren't that tuned in, like kind of give us a little overview of what those flavors are and what a SOC is and why organizations, when they're looking for one of these solutions, should ask those questions about whether or not there's a SOC, whether or not they're using MDR versus XDR versus EDR. Can you kind of give us a little background there?
Yeah, so if you're looking at, if they say there's a SOC behind it, whether it's, a SOC that, or an organization that just provides security operations center, which staff security analysts or security techs or however you want to call it, all they're doing is, ingesting that data from your tool set and looking at and validating when there's an incident.
So a SOC is like a security centric help desk. Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
So they're alerting the organization when something's happening. Same thing as, like how we do, you tell us, hey, something's broken on my machine. same concept, except for the SOC is telling you that there's an issue that's detected. When you're looking at the different acronyms, whether it's EDR, MDR, XDR, most are going to have a SOC behind it. EDR is specific to endpoint detection. So basically your Nextgen AV, Silence, SentinelOne, etc. When you're looking at MDR, that's really where you start to bring in multiple detecting tools, whether it's your endpoint, SIM, anything along those lines. They're starting to bring that data in and correlate it. That's really where you get your MDR, because they're managing all these different ingestion points and, you know, figuring out if it's a, you know, something being seen on a machine is traversing the network because it's pulling logs off your switches and your firewalls and things like that. So that's where that's all coming into play. It's just, you know, kind of as you stack different tools being ingested into the SOC, you're getting into your MDR, and XDR is just basically having any log source being dropped in. So you have different telemetry points.
A lot of like threat hunting and like log systems and potentially stuff from ThreatLocker and like anything that you can aggregate. You're kind of going up the stack from endpoint detection responses. Hey, we found something that might be interesting, to we've correlated something that might be interesting with an MDR, all the way up to XDR is like we've correlated and isolated, and like so you can start like integrating IPS, IDS, all that other stuff kind of all into those solutions.
Exactly. And one thing I would say 99% of the SOCs out there will not do remediation. They will give the information to your MSP or your, you know, on staff IT folks to do that because they don't have the tools or they don't have the knowledge of your environment. So they could potentially make things even worse. So that's where it's important. If you've got an EDR that can isolate a device off the network, they can do that. And then that way it should limit the spread.
So to keep pulling back the layers of the onion, so past your zero trust where we're blocking applications to EDR and something weird's going on, we want to get in front of it. Then there's kind of another, what I would call semi-proactive thing that we do, and that's the internet content filtering, right? So again, like used to be in the back in the day, you would have it installed like on your firewall or something, or on DHCP, and it would point you to OpenDNS or one of those other services, and or you know, you would have something on the firewall where you could do content filtering. Barracuda used to have a device. It's kind of evolved a lot, right? So what is it doing now that we're more disparate, and kind of what products are out there, and what are people using?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I remember early 2000s bringing in an internet content filtering where basically all it was doing was you're putting in categories and websites that you don't want people having access to. Now it's taken that a couple steps further, and they're actually agents you deploy, since we're all dispersed, on the device, that it's also doing DNS content filtering. So, or DNS filtering. So it's looking for and has a list of blacklisted IPs that are known malicious. So they will not let you get there, even though it's a link that says it's for Netflix. They know, hey, that IP is bad, filter that out. So, but you can still do your content filtering, so you can be compliant with, you know, whatever regulations you may have to be compliant to, or just, you know, being a good business owner and blocking things that people really shouldn't be doing during work. So that's really where it's come. Cisco Umbrella, DNS Filter are a couple of the main ones out there that, you know, do this type of thing.
That's cool. And then like to the triangle that we looked at earlier with Colin, one of the other most important things that we're seeing across the board is just training your end users, right? Getting them up to speed on what's going on, because they're really the weakest link in the whole chain, right?
Yeah, they're the last line of defense, because they're the ones that have their fingers on the keyboard or the mouse and are clicking the links or typing in a URL to go somewhere. And it's really understanding how they're, you know, where their responsibility lies. And, you know, you know, it can be daunting to a lot of people because, people want to trust people. Hey, I got this email from Susie. I know this person, and click on it when it could just be a spoofed email or their mailbox has been compromised. We see that a lot. And, invoices or things are being sent from Susie, and it's not really her that's sending these. It's, a bad actor that's out there that's either spoofed their email address or compromised their mailbox. So we like to train, our clients and our internal folks on, the latest and greatest threats that are out there, because that's how things are happening. And then, there's some older ones that are just reminders of, basically making sure that you've got a secure password. You're using MFA. That's the biggest challenge we have, is people think it's hard. Well, it's also really hard when your mailbox has been compromised. You're jumping through hoops.
Yeah, and I think what everybody needs to like with security awareness training, I think one of the interesting things is they're going to reinforce things like MFA in that training, and they're going to reinforce different mechanisms for phishing and whatnot. But like, it's been remarkable to me is that it started out with just kind of some basic slides in the training about, how to identify a rogue email. And now we've got video training around your boss calling you and somebody using a recording from the webinar that he's done of his voice, asking you to do something for him, right? With, vishing and like other like things where you're using advanced simulation of not only people's emails, but their likeness and their voice. And it's just bananas, the kind of things that end users need to now be aware of, right?
Yeah,
like,
and
crazy.
one of the things, actually, I think we posted a quick blog on this last week when I threw it up internally, is bad actors are now taking emails and responding to each other and making a thread so it looks like a legit email. And so that's another thing you've got to look at. And that is something that really just started happening over the last month or so. They'll set up all these emails and add these fake people to it, and they'll send the email. They'll log into this email account, respond to it. And so when you see it, it looks like a communication thread. You wouldn't think that, oh, this is, people are responding to this, so you wouldn't think it's bad, but it can be.
That's crazy. Well, and then when you are compromised, a lot of the times people don't know it, or you're compromised two degrees away, right? So you may be compromised by an exposure through another system, right? Or another organization, which is why it's important that dark web monitoring be a part of what folks are using as part of their advanced threat defense solution, is something that we offer to our clients, right?
Yeah, and it's something, whether, I think everybody has gone to the email address. You've been pawned, or not email address, but the web.
I think it's
to see if their email's been compromised. So I think
it's pwned. I don't like, if you've been pawned, you've been taken someplace and somebody gave somebody else money for you to come back for you in 30 days. And if they don't, then you're stuck there.
Yeah. So this takes a step further and automatically tells us if, they're seeing your information, whether it's your email address and password, personal information on the dark web for sale. So it reports back and tells us what information is out there. And this happens through everybody signs up for stuff. I know Dick's Sporting Goods had an app that was compromised, and I saw a lot of names, get triggered off of that. So when you sign up for stuff, you're hoping that the third party is, taking responsibility for your information, but they can get breached as well and have that data siphoned off. So there's many layers where your information can get out there. It may not be a direct incident from your organization. It could be 2 or 3 layers down.
I think this is an indirect consequence of people trying to be more secure. So they use like a complicated password and they want to remember it. So they use it in a bunch of different places. And so, if your identity is compromised, like on LinkedIn, and it happens to have where you work, right? And it's got this password in it that you happen to also use at work or some other place, then you've solved half of the equation for a lot of these folks, which why we really strongly suggest that people have dark web monitoring, just to drive home the idea of using a password manager, using multi-factor authentication, not having the same password in multiple places, using biometric identification when possible, whether it's fingerprints or face recognition on your devices, just to try to minimize the amount of risk that's out there, and to say, hey, look, like just that constant reminder of like something else happened and your information is out on the network or the internet. So you might want to go take a look at it and make some changes.
Yeah, and to add on to that, keeping your personal and professional life separate. Cisco was recently had an incident that bad actors got into their systems, and at least publicly, what they're saying is it was a employee that logged into their Chrome account. So they had Chrome, logged in using their personal information, and stored Cisco related passwords when Chrome asks you, do you want to save this information? So their Google account got compromised. And so they were able to get all these Cisco passwords off of it.
That's bananas. That is simply bananas that like people are going that far. But that's the world we live in now. And so it's crazy stuff. So kind of, in summary, we've learned a lot about what zero trust looks like, what applications are out there, and kind of an example of one with ThreatLocker. We've learned a lot about the stack that we believe a lot of organizations should be using in order to protect their data from their end users, from their employees, from that sort of thing, right? So there's a lot of good information here, Rob. From a closing remarks standpoint, like, what do you want anybody who watches this to kind of come away with and understand about advanced threat defense, the product suite, and or the use of application whitelisting through zero trust?
Really, it comes down to just being educated. There's a lot of different tools out there that can do the job. We see it all the time because we're vetting out a lot of these tools and trying to understand what works for us, what doesn't. And but really, at the end of the day, look at these tools seriously, because the security landscape changes daily. And if you're looking for different tools, look for what will suffice today and ask what the direction is tomorrow, because we see it all the time, all the changes, all the threats. But definitely you need to have some sort of Nextgen AV with EDR. You need to have a zero trust is very beneficial at the application layer, because it will stop a number of things that try to get in, even things you wouldn't even think about. So just like Colin showed, command prompts, PowerShell, accessing things it's not supposed to, that all goes away and you can sleep easier. If you're in a compliance space and have regulations you have to follow, you got SIM tools, you got vulnerability management, the list goes on and on. So it's really just being educated on what you need, and and also understand where your cyber insurance is taking you and how those are happening, because we're starting to see insurance companies not paying out because they did forensics on an incident and found it was a nation state. That in the declaration of your insurance is an act of war, whether you're IronEdge or IBM. It's a nation state. That's how they're starting to look at it, because they're in the business of making money. They're going to find ways not to pay out. So be truthful on it. If it's asking for tools, we're always here to help with that. So,
well, and that's a good point we always talk about in our presentations, is not all tools are created equal. So, I strongly believe doing something is better than doing nothing. So please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying if you can't afford the best tool, you shouldn't get any tool. But what I am saying, to Rob, your point is, if you are looking at tools, or if you're looking to pick a provider to help you with tools, start by looking at whatever your insurance company is asking of you for your cyber policy, and then kind of determine what best in class of those tools might look like, because there are places out there or folks that will cheap out on their tool delivery just because they want to check a box, right? They're like, look, I'm offering this EDR to my client, but it's not really EDR. It's actually like a normal antivirus product, but it's got like a wraparound on it and they call it EDR, right? And so your security insurance policy may not pay out for that sort of thing. You might want to check with your providers to make sure that you understand what level of application that they expect from a maturity standpoint, and then how you want to address it. I will say this: there are certain organizations out there that are regulated, and there are certain companies out there that have absolutely no desire to install a very expensive and onerous security platform. They just want to check the boxes so that they can get past the point where they are audited. That's fine. There are tools for that. If you want an effective tool, if you want a tool that is going to play well with other tools, that's going to be a part of your cyber policy, it's going to protect you, those tools are probably going to cost a little bit more money, and they're going to take some time to get implemented, and there's going to be some ongoing maintenance that's going to have to happen with them as everything evolves and changes. So please be mindful of that from a holistic standpoint. When you're looking at products, you're looking at providers, they're not all created equal. Understand what your business actually needs against what you're being sold, and review it against your cyber policy or your liability insurance or whatever that looks like, so you can make a more informed decision. Rob, is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap this up?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank y'all for joining us. My name is Andrew. This is Rob. We are the IronEdge Group. We want to thank our friends over at ThreatLocker, especially Colin and Ben, for having the opportunity to come be a part of our little show today. And we hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, feel free to go to our website. Check it out. It's probably down below in YouTube or on our blog. So we'll catch you later. Bye, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody.